In this video, we are going to create a dynamic form such that when the app loads a JSON, it will display different type of fields. For example, here there are input field, checkbox, and also the select field at here. Now first we go to the command prompt, and inside the React project, this folder, we are going to use the create React app, and we just copy these from the documentations, and then we paste here, and then we change the name to dynamic form. After the project is created, we use cd dynamic form to navigate to this folder. And then we type code to open the Visual Studio Code. And then we are going to delete the unnecessary file. For example, there's app.css, the app.test, the report.web, and the index.css, and also the setup test, and also the logo. And inside the app.js, we delete the logo and also the app.css. And inside the index.js, we delete this report web vitals. So at the end, we also can delete this, also the index.css. So we save all, and then we go to the terminal, and we type npm start. Now we can see that its logo is not defined at the line 7. So we go to the app.js, and we are going to delete this, and then we just type app here. Now we can see the website displayed here, and since we are going to create a form, so we are going to go to the bootstrap, and then we search the form. We should go to the CDN first. So before we go to the form, we go to the copy the CSS, and then we go to the public and index, and then we paste the link to the top. And also we have to copy the JavaScript, so we copy this, and at the end of the body we paste the JavaScript here, and then we search the form. And when we go to the form control, and we can go to the overview and copy this, and we paste at the app.js. But since this is HTML, so we should go to convert this to JSX. So we highlight all of this, and then right click and convert HTML to JSX. Now we go to the website, we can see the input field and also the checkbox. And also we type the container. Now you can see it will send it to the website. And since we also want to use the select, so we go to the form again and search for the select. And then we copy this and then paste to the form. And then we select this and convert this to JSX. So now we can see the select box here. We also have the dummy data, so we can paste under the source, and this is the form element, and you can see there are page labels and also different fields, such as this one is the input fields, and this one is the select box, and at last we will also have the checkbox here. So we base on this to create different types of fields. So we go to the app.js, and first thing we need to do is to import the form JSON from the form element.json, and then we try to console.log the form JSON, and at last we go to the select and delete this selected and also the values, and then we save it. Now we can see it pop up the JSON here, and there's also the page label that is the data from the JSON that we just import. Now we are going to create the components. So we go to create the components folders, and then we create the element.js, and then we type RAFCE, and then we just type element here, and then we go to the app.js, and we are going to import the use state and use effect from the React, and then import element from components and element. So the first thing is we are going to create the element and set elements, and then we set the default values is equal to null, and which means the default value is null, and we are going to use the set element to set these elements to the data from the form JSON. So we are going to use the use effect to set the values of the elements. So we use set elements, and then we pass the form JSON to the elements. And then we are going to delete these cleanup functions, and since we are just set the elements once, so we do not need to pass any dependency here. And if you back to the JSON data, we can see this is an array. So we just want to get this object. So we have to use a square bracket and put a 0, want to get the object from this array. So after we get the elements, we are going to get the page labels, these page labels, and also the fields from the elements. So we use constant fields and page label equal to elements. Normally we can do this, is already okay, but since we are getting data from, for example, from the remote URL, we are not sure whether this is null when we are trying to destructure the fields and page label. So we need to add these null-git coalescing operators. So if it do not have any elements, it will becomes a empty object. So now we already have the page labels and fields. So now we can pass the page label first. So we type h3, and then we pass the page label. Now we can see the job application forms displayed here. So inside the forms, we are going to look through the fields and display the elements. So the first thing is we are checking whether there are fields here. If there are fields, then we use web functions, and then we pass the field, and then id, and then we going to display the element. And to look through the fields, we have to use the key. We pass the index as the key. So if there is no fields here, we are going to return the null. So now if we go to the web page, and you can see there are elements here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you go back to the form JSON, you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and these 6 fields. So we go to the app.js, and we are going to pass this field data to the elements. So we use the field and equal to field. Now we are going to extract the elements like these input fields and also the checkbox to the components. So we are going to create a new folder called elements, and then we are going to create a input.js, and then at the app we are going to extract this and paste to the input field, and then we create another element called checkbox. And then we copy this check and also paste here. And at last, we will go to copy the select. So we create the select.js and copy from the app.js. We copy this HTML and paste inside the select.js. So we can delete the other things. So we jump to the element.js and we try to switch the cases So depends on the JSON data, it will return the input field, select box, or the checkbox. So we already passed the field here, so we can extract the field type from these informations. So we go to element, and then we destructure the field and the field type. So at here we use the switch case, and then it depends on the field type. And then if this is text, we just return the input component, and we import the input from elements input, and then when we go to the select, it will return the select. And at last, if this is checkbox, and then it will return the checkbox. And we should also import the select from the elements. And also this, we should delete this unreachable code. So we remove all unreachable code, and also delete this return statement. And by default, we returned null. And there is a mistake here because this is inside the field. We should use a curly bracket to destructure the field type. So now if we refresh the page, we can see the input field and also the select box and also the checkbox. And you can see all the input fields are the same because we haven't passed the information to this input field and also the other elements. So now we are going to pass this information to the input field. So we go to the element.js, and besides that, we just pass the field type. We also want to pass the other information like field ID and field label and field placeholders. And all this information you can find in the JSON data because we have these things that we have to pass to the elements. And at last, we also need to pass the field values. So we have to pass the information to the input field. So we can copy this and paste here. And then the field type we do not need because it just need to use inside the elements. And the field ID is equal to the field ID, and the field label is equal to the field label. The field placeholder is equal to the field placeholder. And then we copy these and paste to the input field because we already passed these four informations. So we go to the input field and going to destructure this. And because we do not have the field type, we can delete this one. And now if we go to pass the field label and we paste this email address, and if you save it and run the app again, you can see now you have name, email, and also the contact numbers, and all are the difference. And now we are going to change this type to text, and also we are going to change the placeholder is equal to, if there is field placeholder, then we will pass the information of field placeholders, and otherwise we will pass empty string, and also the value is equal to field values. Now we can see that enter name, enter email, and enter contact numbers, and based on different types of the input field. And now we pass the information to the select box. So we go to the element again, and we copy this and paste to the select. And beside these four informations, and you can see from the JSON data, if you're using the select box, there are few options. So we also have to pass the few options in the element. So we destructure the few options, and also we pass the few options is equal to few options. So we back to the select, and we copy from the input field and paste to the select, and we have the few options. And then we delete this because we can generate the options from the few options. So we copy this and we use the map, and then we pass the value here by using option label, because inside the form element you can see the values is here. So we use option label, and also the text is the same, so we copy this and paste here. And also we have to pass the key is equal to the index. And it is also better to check whether there are few options first. So we are going to check if the few options is the length greater than 0, If yes, we are going to render the options. And now you can see we still cannot see the options, and this is because we should not use the curly bracket for rendering, and we should use just the bracket, or even we delete the bracket because we just has one element here. So now if we save it and go to the website again, you can see it already generated the options here. And at last, we are going to pass the information to the checkbox. So we go to the element and we copy this for fields and paste to the checkbox. And we do not have the placeholder here, so we can delete this. And we can copy the structure from the input and paste to the checkbox. We delete the placeholders. And actually, I forgot that the select box, we also has the field labels. So we can add the label. Maybe we copy from the input field. So we copy this label, paste to the select, we paste here. And so you can see the error because we should not have two elements or more than one element in the return. So we have to add the fragment to wrap the whole things. And now if you go back to the website, you can see the employment desired label here. Now we already passed the information to the elements, so we are going to add the functions. In order to pass all the functions to these elements, we have to create the form context. So at the source folders, we create a new file called form context.js, and then inside the form context, we are going to import the create context from React, and then we export constant form context is equal to create context is null, and then we go to the app.js and create the two functions, and we delete all this space, and on the top we are going to create constant handleSubmit, and at this stage we just console.log the elements. And in real cases, you should pass the information to your server. And the next part is handleChange. And we just load handleChange this test. And then on top, we are going to import the form context from components, elements. And then here, we are going to use the form context.provider to wrap the whole things. So we use form context.provider, and then we put this at the end, and then we pass the values. And you can see there are errors that the form context is not exported from the elements because it should be from the form context. And we should use form context. There are typo here. So now we can pass the values. So we pass the handleChange functions. So now if you go to the input field and we import the use context, and also we import the form context from the form context, and then we extract the handleChange functions by using constant handleChange is equal to use context and form context. So now if we go to handleChange, and we should use a curly bracket here. Now if we refresh the page, you can see this handleChange here, which is from the input field. So it proves that you can get these functions from the app.js by using the form context provider. And at this stage, we can ignore this warning because we haven't added on change to the input field. So we go to detailed, the handleChange functions. We can base on the ID and also to change the values by using the event. So the first thing is we are going to make the copy of the elements because we don't want to directly change the elements. So we use the spec operators to create the elements, and then the new elements dot for each dot fields dot for each, and each field we are going to check the field type. So we destructure the field type the field ID and also the field value from the field. Because what we are going to do is, when you look at the JSON, there are different field ID. So each time when the user change on this field, we are going to check, is it equal to one of the ID? If this is the same, then we are going to set a new value to this object. So we back to the app.js and go to the handleChange. So if the ID is equal to the field ID, then this is fine, and then we are going to set the field and we add the new properties. Field value is equal to the event.target.value, and then after we change the value, we are going to set the elements, which means we are going to update the data with the new elements. And then we delete this log, and also we are going to console.log the elements. After we create a handleChange function, we have to pass to the input field. So inside the input field, we are going to add the onChange is equal to event and handleChange field ID and also the event. And we can see there are errors here, and this is because we forgot to delete the testing code. So we keep handleChange when we render the input field. So now we can go to type something here. So if we type Peter and we back to the app.js, we are going to console.log the elements, and then we go to check the fields, and you can see the field values already changed to Peter. So we already successfully passed the change function to the input field. So now we are going to pass this to the select box. So we go to the select menu, and then actually we can copy from the input field. So we copy this and paste to the top, and then we are going to get the handleChange functions from the form context, and then we copy this and then go to the select, and then we go to here and paste on change. So we go back to the website, and then if we go to press the part-time here, and then we go to check the field and the employment, and then we can see the field value is full-time that we just select. So we also successfully passed the onChange function to the select box. So we go to the checkbox, and again we copy this too, and then go to the checkbox and replace this with the form context. And also we get the handleChange from the use context, and then we are going to also pass the labels to the checkbox, and also the check should be equal to the check values, field values. And then we also copy the handleChange from here to the checkbox. And if you go to the checkbox, you can see there are some problems because actually we should not have any values. We just have true or false for the checkbox. So if you go to the checkbox field, and you can see the value is on and not true or false. So we should make some changes on the handleChange functions. And we go back to the app.js, and if the field ID is equal to ID, we are going to add a switch case, and we are going to check the field type. If this is checkbox, then we set the field value is equal to the target.checked, and otherwise we set the default as the values. The field value is equal to the target.values, and it seems that we haven't used any field values here, so we can delete these variables. So now if you go back to the checkbox, now we can go to the field again and go to the driving license is set false. And if we take the checkbox and go to the latest values, and you can see it become true. So we already bind all the values and also functions to each field, and so it also generates a dynamic form. And at last, we just add a submit functions. So we back to the app.js and go to the, and then we type on click is equal to submit. Now if we type anything and add some email and then click submit, And I forgot to use the event.prevent default, so we have to pass the event to here, and then we go back to the handleSubmit. So after we prevent the default, we add the values and submit. It will get the whole JSON here, and you can pass this JSON to your remote server.